Everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are diving into one of the most fascinating events in the life of Jesus, the Transfiguration. There's a big question that come up when we read the gospel. Was the Transfiguration event a literal event or just a vision? And what does the appearance of Moses and Elijah mean, especially when the Bible tells us the dead have nothing to do with the living? Let's break this down. First and foremost, this question came from a sister from Nigeria, and I really appreciate you for this wonderful question. All right, the Transfiguration is found in three of the synoptic gospels, the Matthew chapter 17, Mark chapter 9, and Luke chapter 9. And Jesus took Peter, James, and John up a mountain where his appearance was transformed. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. Then something truly remarkable happened. Moses and Elijah appeared, talking with Jesus about his upcoming mission in Jerusalem. But here is the question: what were Moses and Elijah doing there? After all, Moses died a long time ago, and Elijah was taken up in a wild wind. What does this tell us about their role, and why are they with Jesus at this moment? So when Peter, awestruck by the moment, suggests building three shelters for Jesus, Moses, and Elijah, a voice from heaven interrupts, saying, "This is my son, whom I have chosen. Listen to him." And then, just like that, Elijah and Moses disappear from the scene, leaving only Jesus. All right. Now, there's a lot happening in this passage. Firstly, Moses represents the law, and Elijah represents the prophets, both of which were foundational in the history of Israel and God's dealing with man. But their appearance with Jesus at this moment isn't about elevating them to Jesus' level. It's actually the opposite. It shows that the law and the prophets point to and are fulfilled in Jesus. Their presence centers on Christ's mission to bring salvation through his death and resurrection. Jesus now outshines both the law and the prophet. He outshines Elijah and Moses. And that is one of the reasons that they had to disappear from the scene. Now, after many years, Peter wrote in his own epistle about this experience, saying, "We were eyewitnesses of his majesty when we were with him on the sacred mountain." So, was it a literal event or just a vision? Let's clear that first. Yes, where it gets very, very interesting. The Transfiguration is best understood as a literal event with a visionary aspect. So it's like the mix of the two. The disciples physically saw Jesus in his glorified state, along with Moses and Elijah. But this event also carried deep symbolic meaning, which has great vision. When the cloud covered them and God said, "This is my son, listen to him," it pointed directly to Jesus as the ultimate authority above the law and above the prophet. He is the word that God wants to speak. He is the one through which we can interpret both the law and the prophet. The law and the prophet fades. They fade in comparison to Jesus, whose glory is permanent. Even though Moses and Elijah were great in their time, the Transfiguration reveals that their ministries were temporary and were always leading up to, as Martin Luther put it in one of his writings, that their light is like a wax candle compared to the brilliance of the sun. Compare the sun and the candle. So Jesus is the sun, but they are like candle, and they have no significance compared to Jesus. So to answer the question, was the Transfiguration a literal event or a vision? It is both. It was a real event experienced by the disciples, but with a visionary element that revealed deep spiritual truth about who Jesus is, his true identity. The law and the prophet pointed to him, But in the end, only Jesus remains the final and complete revelation of God. And what about Moses and Elijah? Their presence shows us that God's plan all along was to point to Jesus, because Jesus didn't come to abolish the law or the prophet, but to fulfill them. Moses and Elijah appearing at this critical moment in Jesus' life serve to affirm that Jesus is the culmination of all that came before. Jesus is the culmination of all that God has been speaking about in the Old Testament. So in Jesus, we have the final word. In Jesus, we have the final revelation of God. That's all for today. If you found this explanation very helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, feel free to leave your thoughts and your questions in the comment below. See you next time. Bye.